All right. First up, we have Damon Chivers from Flatiron School. He's going to be talking about using hooks with React-Redux. Go ahead, Damon, take over the screen.
Okay. Thank you so much, Justin. Let me get that screen going for you guys. Here we go. I guess you saw how many slides I got. But what's going on, everybody? My name is Damon. I am from the Denver Flatiron campus. I'm an instructor there, as well as just a developer in the area, full stack developer. I could go through all the languages I know, but I can't count them all in one hand, you know? So I won't go through that. But today I am going to talk to you guys about React-Redux with hooks. Just before that, just to give you a little bit more background, I jumped into coding from a boot camp. So I went to a boot camp back in the day. Nowadays, I teach at one. I was an artist before all this good stuff. So if you like music, if you're into audio engineering, into painting, any of that stuff, feel free to reach out and just chat about it. And also, if you want to talk about coding, I do that too. So today we're going to talk hooks with React-Redux. I am kind of going through this at a level where it's like intermediate, right? I kind of expect some knowledge about React, some knowledge about Redux. But if you haven't jumped into either of those things yet, I did have like a quick hits on these topics. What is Redux? What are hooks? And what is React-Redux, right? So starting out, what is Redux? There's the answer, state management tool, right? But what does that mean, a state management tool? Well, Redux kind of helps with, if you built any apps in any type of front-end frameworks, Angular, Vue, React, whatever it may be, you know that as your app kind of grows, it can be hard managing the state, or even just in the beginning, right? Sometimes you realize state needs to be in multiple places or passed down the chain, 20 levels deep through components. So Redux is a solution for you for managing that state. Essentially, instead of having to have state in these different chains inside of your React app, what you can do is kind of have a centralized state or a global state that exists kind of outside of that hierarchy, right? At least at the top level. So that is mostly what Redux is. It's just a state management tool. It's predictable. It helps you. It's way easier to test, easier to work with, and also has this really cool debugger that allows you to kind of like do some time-based debugging, where you can like play through your app and kind of see what state changes have occurred, what broke things, all kinds of things of that nature. Hooks. So next up, what are hooks, right? Hooks, fancy old functions, right? I love to just let people know that these are just functions, because when you hear the word hooks, you kind of start to think of like, oh, this has to be something special, right? They're not, all right? They're just plain old functions. Those functions were introduced into React, we'll say 2019, February. And so it's kind of new, right? But in programming, things move so fast that for most of us, that's not new at all, right? Hooks are kind of old. So what they do is they allow us to literally hook into a component lifecycle. So in old style React, you would use classes and lifecycle methods in order to kind of listen for different points of which a component is re-rendering. With hooks, you can do the same thing, right? You just have a function that allows you to do it. But that's hooks in short. They are quick, fast, and easy to work with if you code JavaScript all the time, right? It's just fancy old functions. And last, what is React-Redux? Well, it's a binding library for using Redux in React. Redux is a standalone library. You don't have to use it in React. You can use it in Vue, you can use it in Angular, you can use it in plain old vanilla JS, any of those based on your choice, right? So React-Redux, it just gives you like some methods to bind Redux to React to make it easier for you to use. That way you don't have to worry about the setup and how to connect it to like the virtual DOM and the rendering process. All that is done for you with React-Redux. Now, I did leave time in this talk for questions. So if you have any questions about any of that stuff, feel free to ask.
This isn't a general question. It is kind of a question, but this is my first meeting. So, hey, how you guys doing?
Hey, how's it going?
And I was actually just got finished a boot camp at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was looking for like some open source projects. And I was like, I love React, so I was like looking for like some React projects to work on. But like a lot of the issues that I was coming across were like a little bit advanced. Is there like any code bases that you would recommend to like start off with?
That's a great question. For learning React, right? Just some basic stuff for React.
Yeah, I do like React. I really like the framework, but I'm open to like JavaScript as well. That's like my primary language.
For
So
sure. Well, I know like things like what is it? Codecademy or like Coursera, they have like some pretty good like beginner things. I would like shamelessly plug myself and give you some videos I've done to like kind of get you started on that stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
but like I'm comfortable with React. I've built like a React application before. I'm just kind of like I'm looking at that point where like I need like projects to work on that are like open source where like other people and like make contributions.
for sure. Yeah. I'm sure that we could get some in the chat for these for you,
I
man.
didn't mean to like go off on a tangent, guys. I just figured this was like a good time since we were already open the floor for questions.
Hell yeah. It looks like somebody tossed in JS books on GitHub. So yeah, check that chat out. I'm sure they can hook you up with some good stuff for that. Some good starters. Maybe somebody will shoot you my to-do app series, kind of get you started in React.
All right, let me know where you at. Are you on Egghead or?
No, it'll YouTube GitHub, but we could toss something to you later.
I think I just sent you over a message on LinkedIn. Let me know.
Okay, sure thing, man. Any other questions about these quick hits?
Hi, first meeting as well. I've been working as a full stack engineer for a while, and a couple times I run into possibly using Redux, but we just opted to use context instead. So
Sure.
could you speak to maybe the case where Redux would have more value than just using the context API instead?
Oh, I'll tell you straight up, there's no additional value with using Redux if you're using context already. Essentially, Redux was around before context was, right? React introduced context, but it's essentially the exact same pattern. Everything that you do in context, like you have reducers and you have actions for those reducers, and you have that context or that centralized state that you can pass throughout your application. It is all the same thing. I guess the downside would be if you decide to use Redux, is that now you have an additional package within your application, right? Whereas context comes with React, but they are essentially the exact same thing. You'll know the pattern both ways. Great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we slide on to the next thing? Cool. Thank you. Well, thanks for asking questions, guys. If you guys don't ask questions, this talk will be very short. So I appreciate you. Next up, here we're going to start talking about some of the syntax, right? So what we have here is, I said, out with the old, right? If you have been using Redux and React, or if you haven't even started yet, you might come across older videos. What I mean is like before 2020, right? So even in 2020, where they use this old style to connect components to the Redux store. So there's definitely a process of connecting and all that stuff that I didn't show here. Like I said, kind of assuming you guys know some Redux, but this is the old way of connecting a application or a component to the Redux store. You got these two functions, map state to props and map dispatch to props, both of which are arguments that get passed into this connect function. And connect in React Redux is like a higher order component. It essentially takes in those two functions, gives you back access to the state of the store, gives you back access to dispatch in the store. And then now you can use the store, the context of the store, inside of your React component. Now, the thing about this, and the reason why I put it here, is because this is kind of where I started coding React, my React Redux product. Like, we'll jump into some code here in a bit. It's going to look like this to start off. And one thing that I always find when trying to explain these two functions is, first off, the naming you would think is intuitive, right? We're mapping state to props or mapping dispatch to props, but it's not, all right? In fact, it's very difficult to just understand what's going on sometimes with these two functions. And connect takes even more functions that I decided not to talk about in this talk, just because we don't really have any hooks for those things. It's about props, merge props, and optional props. But these two functions, one of them takes in the state from the store, or you get access to the state, and now you can build props based on that state. So it's like delineating in a sense, where you say, hey, I want the state of characters, and so I'm just going to access that state via this map state to props function. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a prop that has access to that. So I'm not like directly dealing with the state. I'm kind of just taking a reference for it, you could say, and creating a prop of that. If you know anything about props in React or Vue or any of these, you can't mutate props. If you ever try to like reset a prop, you run into an error, which is really nice. Because if you can't change props, that means you can't accidentally mutate the state, which also means that you run into less problems or less bugs throughout your code. What's nice about this is that in Redux, there is only one way to change state anyway, right? It's this thing called dispatch. And you actually can see it in my slide here, right about there, kind of circling it with my mouse. But the dispatch function is the one and only way to change state in Redux. And that makes it easier so that you don't mutate anything. But this style that you're seeing here, this code, this is the old way of going about connecting your component to the React Redux store. The reason why I wanted to highlight this is because we have a much, much simpler way nowadays, right? With hooks, the whole point of hooks is to make it easier for you to write JavaScript functions and just write functional JavaScript, really. And so with these new hooks, all that code you just saw in that last slide can be reduced down to these 2 lines. It's beautiful, very beautiful, I know, all right? It's the great part about hooks. It always makes it so that the code just looks so much better, right? 2 lines of code, one gives me access to dispatch, just like that other map dispatch to props function did. And then one gives me access to the state, which you can see here, I'm saying, hey, I want these characters. I'm gonna take it from state and I'm just gonna pull it out, save it to a variable. So already I took about, I don't know, 8 lines or so of code. Here, let's bounce back real quick. So yeah, we got about, around 8 to 9 lines of code and transfer it into 2, right? It's beautiful, man. Like this is what you want to do, right? We don't write code for the computers. We write it for us, for you. So if I want my code to be cleaner so that, let's say Brandon or Ahmed or anybody in this chat was going to read it, like I would want to make it the easiest to read, right? It's all about readability. So transferring 8 lines down to 2, cleaner, more readable. And that's going to make you be the person that they're like, I want him writing my code all the time, or her writing my code all the time, right? Because it's easier to read, essentially. That's what I'm getting at. But these 2 functions, use dispatch and use selector, or these 2 hooks, they just give us access to the state of the store and to the dispatch function. You need dispatch to change state. You need the selector hook to access that state. Any questions about anything I talked about so far? Remember, this is my fluff time, so help me out here.
All right, so this is more of just a check. So I'm assuming these play nice when I compose them into custom hooks, right? More just a general ask.
Yeah, definitely, they do. That's the great thing about them. You could definitely use these hooks within your other hooks, and you will not have any problems with them, right? There is a slight thing that we could talk about with that, where this use selector hook, it does give you access to the entire state. And if you wanted to return back like an object from that state to be able to access multiple values, like you could do that, right? But there is this type of equal that we got to talk about, right? Like you got strict equals, and then we got these shallow equals that we can chat about. And so if you just use the use selector hook to return back one value, you'll be fine. If you use it to return back an object of multiple pieces of state or multiple values, what ends up happening is that sometimes that the change in one of those attributes or one of those properties could cause the entire component to re-render, right? And I'm sure if you're using hooks now, you know, use effect is kind of the same way. You need to make sure that you give it some dependencies so it knows, hey, don't change every time this function is remounted. Like only do it when its context changes, basically. And use selector works the same way. If you return an object, you might want to run like a shallow equal on that object just to make sure that all the properties are being checked before it causes a re-render to the component. And in fact, I believe I threw that on this slide. Yep. It is an optional argument that you could toss in just to make sure something like that happens. That way it can play nicely with your other hooks, just to make sure you keep like the same reference, right? For those of you who don't know what a shallow equal is, it's just basically it looks at the object, checks each property, and it will only change that property of the object that's different as your state changes, instead of causing the entire object to be different or causing like your component to re-render every single time. Other questions?
Yeah, hi Damon, longtime listener, first time caller. Just wanted to ask about the use dispatch. Like, do you just have to call that and then that's it? Or do you use that anywhere else in the code base?
Yeah, so having access to dispatch is super important for you in Redux to be able to send actions to the store. There's a flow, right? So if you use Redux, there's a flow is where you dispatch an action to the store, an action just being an object. Once that object gets to the store, it runs through all your reducers. As it goes through the reducers, your reducers kind of decide, hey, am I supposed to change state here or am I not, right? And so that's kind of the flow. So you need dispatch to send actions to the store. With this hook use dispatch, once you call it once in your component, you now have access to that function, right? So we will use it within the code base, but you only need to bring it in wherever you plan on dispatching an action to the store or wherever you plan on changing state. The cool thing about this hook use dispatch is that you don't have to worry about memoizing it or anything. It's already done for you. It will always point to the reference of the one dispatch function that exists on the store. And that's something nice. That kind of goes to what Chancellor was asking about, like, does this play nice with some of my hooks? Yes, they kind of already set this stuff up for you, which is pretty good. Thanks for the question, Bob. Any others? I think I'm about 15 minutes in. We're doing good. All right. So next up, what I do have for us is just some live coding. All right. I want to show you guys like not only just how we just transfer those 8 lines to 2, I want to show you what that looks like in your code. All right. So I did build an application for us today. So here we are. And I think I'm running it on this same. Give me 1 second. There we go. Cool. So I built a little Rick and Morty app. Most of my students probably know, like, oh, typical Damon showing Rick and Morty. Yes. I built the Rick and Morty app just using their API. It's very easy to use. So I just came on here, threw some characters in our Redux store, put them up so that we have something to mess around with today. So in my code, I was a little extra, guys. I'm not going to lie. I wanted to show you how clean hooks make your React code. So I decided to code a class. Anybody who knows me knows I would never use a class in my React app. It's just not my style. All right. Don't like using classes, but I did it just to kind of break it down a little bit. What we have here is that on mount of my component, I'm using Axios to just send me a request, network request to that Rick and Morty API. We get that data in here. We set the characters. That hits our Redux store. And you'll see that those 2 functions that I was displaying, map state to props and map dispatch to props, is right here at the bottom. All right. Those functions look exactly like they did in that screenshot because I took them from here. All right. And one of these functions gives me access to the state, and that lets me access those characters that's in my Redux store. All that stuff kind of exists out here. So this is what my reducer looks like. In case the action of set characters ever comes through my store, it'll go ahead and just set those into my state. And I'm just accessing that again with this map state to props function. Next, we got map dispatch to props. This is kind of towards Bob's question. He was like, hey, you just call that function and we have access to dispatch? Yes. In the old way, no, right? You had to write your map dispatch to props function just to get access to it and kind of go from there. Now you could, but don't get me wrong, toss nothing here at the bottom. So you basically say null as my second argument of connect, and that would give you access to dispatch as a prop. It's a little faster, right? But you would just be able to do like props.dispatch, and you would have access to that function. People did it this way so that you could kind of see more clearly how dispatch is being used instead of just having it out there all willy-nilly in the open, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna reshuffle this component first of all, to be a functional component, right? We're in 2021. I'm gonna take y'all there. And then we're also gonna use hooks, all right? So we're gonna get rid of some of these lifecycle methods and we're gonna get rid of this class. And right now we're sitting at around about 43 lines of code in here. The component is probably taking up a good 30 or so. But let's see what this looks like with hooks. So first things first, let's change this class over into a functional component. So a couple of things get taken out of here. We no longer need to access component or extends. Here we're just writing a function. That function may or may not receive props. And then I just get rid of this render. Cool, already cleaned it up some. Next up, what we get is my component did mount. That is a lifecycle method that only exists in classes. It comes from the component class. So I'm actually gonna get rid of that. And instead, I still do need to do this on like during the component's lifecycle. So I'm gonna use a hook. I already imported this up top, use effect, but use effect is gonna mimic that component did mount for me. So I'm gonna write this out. Use effect, oops. It is a function, takes in 2 arguments. So this is one of our React hooks. And I'm just gonna pass in, let's just do an anonymous function for now. And that anonymous function is going to basically do my fetch request for me. And then so my use effect doesn't run a ridiculous amount of times and cause my computer to blow up, we gotta make sure we throw those dependencies in there. That dependency list is just to make sure that I can continue running this just on the first render of the component, not multiple times. So I've just changed my component did mount to a use effect, so a hook. And then I am going from there to get rid of this old style of accessing the Redux store. Yeah, Martin, I like the way you think. Hooks are basic React now. Let's start making it a thing, right? So what's next is I don't have a class anymore, so we start getting rid of things like this. Oh, this is the best part about getting rid of classes. When you don't have to use the this keyword and you don't have to worry about all the different context that's going on, it's perfect, it's beautiful, all right? Now I'm gonna start working these functions out. First things first, let's start with the dispatch one. Since we can just use a hook for that, from React-Redux, I'm gonna say use dispatch. That's gonna bring in that hook for me. And what I wanna say is, I wanna access the dispatch function. So here, use dispatch, all good. Now I am using this dispatch function within this set characters function. I don't really have to, but to keep my code kind of somewhat the same, I'm just gonna extract out that. I'm actually gonna make it its own function up top. So we'll say like set characters as a function, like so. Still gives me access to use dispatch. Now I can still change state in my store, so on and so forth. This no longer needs to be props because this exists right here in this function. So another little piece that gets taken away. The last thing I need to do is that since I was accessing my store via this map state to props function, I still need to access the state. That's where I'm going to use that hook that was, oops, I'll get rid of that. That hook that was use selector. So I'll say constant characters is going to be this hook called use selector. It looks kind of like what our map state to props did before. It does take in state as an argument. And then from there, you just pull out whatever piece of state you want to use. So for me, I'm gonna just do state dot characters. That's the character state that I'm trying to access. With that, I now also can get rid of props here because it is no longer a prop. It is just a variable that I'm using within my app. And I do need to make sure that I import this hook up top with use selector. And then last but not least, the last thing that I got to change is we could say bye-bye to that connect function. Don't need that higher order component anymore. We can now just export out our app as normal. And if I did everything right, guys, all right, it's not like I rehearsed this. If I did everything right, I should be able to go to my browser and it all worked the same. Oh, we did it on the first try. Hell yeah. That is us switching over our app component that used to be a class to a functional component using React hooks and React Redux hooks to make it happen. I would say this was a lot cleaner. I would say this is the way to go. And I think Martin would agree with me. Hooks are now the thing. That is really all I got for you today. I am going to open up the end for questions, but I don't want to go too much over my time. Chancellor, I saw you raise your hand. What's up?
So this is more of a style and kind of future React question for you. So with concurrent mode kind of becoming a thing, I know it's not quite there yet. Would a better pattern for, say, your Axios get, basically you make this function a child and then pass in the state that sets in the parent, because then you could have a loading there for a better user experience. And if not, once concurrent comes, I guess, if I remember right, I think it's use effect still, or like lazy effect. I forget what the hook is they're using for that, if you know off the top of your head.
I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't even seen what concurrent is yet. So you got me there for sure. But I'll dive into it for sure. Try to get you an answer later.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem, man. What other questions we got?
This might be a bad question, but is this dispatch kind of doing what like a use state would do, where you kind of like have a function and then like a function that you use to call the method?
So not quite like use state. So use state gives you access to having state within the component. So
Right.
it's a hook that's like, hey, you want to put some state in this functional component? I'll do it for you, right? And then it does give you a function that allows you to change that specific piece of state. With
Okay.
dispatch in Redux, we have this store, this global store that exists. And there is state inside of the store. And dispatch is the only way you can change that state. You do it by, you see me doing here, where I'm basically saying, hey, tell all my functions in my store to look at this object. And if they receive the type of set characters, I want them to set some characters somewhere in the state. In fact, I can give you a quick look at what this looks like. This is my reducer. This is what my store is pretty much built off of right now. And so the action comes through. The type of that action, if it is set characters, something happens. If this wasn't here, it would just return like my default state. But that is what dispatch is for. It's for sending those actions to the store to kind of run through your reducers.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I know it's become obsolete since then, but there used to be a use actions hook to basically call different dispatches. Can you go over like an example of how would you use the use dispatch to call an action?
They actually took that out. I don't know if you know that, but they actually removed the use actions hook.
Yeah, I said it came obsolete, and now you can just use use dispatch to actually call actions.
Yeah, so what you could do is like you can create pretty much like your own function or your own action creators. And the downside to this is if you do create an action creator and you use just dispatch to do so, you actually have to memoize that action creator too. So what ends up happening is that if you don't memoize the action creator, your use effect or like your component could re-render unnecessarily because it doesn't remember what the reference is to your function. And so if you do choose to do that, there's another hook called use callback you should look into. And it basically memoizes your functions for you. And if you don't know what memoizing is, it's basically like, hey, I'm going to set up a reference to your thing somewhere in the application to keep track of the reference to it or where the definition is to stop pretty much those unnecessary re-renders in React. But that's how you do it. You would just create an action creator, use dispatch in that, memoize it with the use callback function, and go from there. I hope I answered your question.
Isn't there a use memo hook too?
There's also a use memo hook. Yep.
What's the difference between that and use callback?
So I believe the use memo hook works pretty much the same as you callback, but it has some different options you can add to it. I don't know those off the top of my head, but use callback is mostly for just the functions. So use memo, you could memorize other things. Use callback is going to accept a function as an argument. And then it also has some other options you can pass in too for memoizing that. But that's a slight difference. Use callback is specifically for one of your callback functions, whereas use memo can be anything. Any data.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I don't want to bounce too much over. I think I'm already hit that. So if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me at, I think I got this up here somewhere. Yeah, let's jump that back in. Here we go. LinkedIn, you just find me, Damon Chivers. I think I'm the only one out there. And then at email, shiversdamon@gmail.com. All right. Also, if any of my Denver folks are in here on Denver devs, I'm just at Damon. But yeah, contact me if you want to talk. Other than that, I will see y'all later. And thank you so much for letting me speak here.
All right. Thank you, Damon.
And there you go. There's your access.